Hail and well met, brave adventurers. My name is DM Bob Yo. Thanks for coming today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about learning to role play for new players. Now, before we get into that, just a reminder, you can look me up online, www.dmbobyo.com. I am also DM Bob Yo on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube as well. So let's get right into it. So one of the biggest struggles that new players to Dungeons and Dragons often have is the pressure to role play. Now, when we talk about role play, we're talking about a very specific part of the Dungeons and Dragons game. We're talking about those social interactions between characters and non-player characters, such as town guards or tavern keeps, but then also interactions between various characters run by different players. And I think part of the struggle comes from just sort of a general feeling of awkwardness. When we're 7 or 8 years old, walking through the woods with large sticks like my cousins and I used to do, and hitting trees with them, pretending those trees are dragons. It was a lot easier to sort of get into character and do voices and that sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of pressure too with the popularity of podcasts, whether that's Matt Mercer's Critical Role, or whether you listen to something like Dungeons and Daddies, or Acquisitions Incorporated, whatever it is. So here in these, you have these voice actors, people who make their living outside of D&D, doing voices and things. So it can be a little intimidating at first. Now, what I want to say first is always know that no matter how silly you feel when you are role-playing your character, most of the time the dungeon master and the other players aren't going to feel like you're being silly. They're going to be happy that you're getting into character. I know that personally as a dungeon master, when I have a player that uses a voice or changes the meter of their speech in order to get into character, I know I very much appreciate it. The second thing I want to remind you of or point out is that Dungeons and Dragons is ultimately a game. And if you're not having fun, then what's the point of playing? And so some people just don't feel like getting into character, that the role-playing part is fun. Dungeons and Dragons is a good system, a good rule system, a good game for you players that fall into that category as well, because there are built-in mechanics. You don't want to have to try to make up something to convince the town guard that your party should be let in with their weapons. Then just say to your dungeon master, I try to convince the town guard to let us in with our weapons. Can I make a persuasion check? And now your dungeon master might encourage you a little bit to try and role play a little bit and say, okay, well, you can, but what do you say to them? And so, just say, well, I tell them all the reasons I think we should be let in, because ultimately the game is such that the rules allow you to do that. Just like you don't have to pick up a physical sword and swing it in order to successfully hit a monster, you as a player don't have to do that. You as a player don't have to cast spells, literal spells. You don't have to say magic words as a player and, to shoot a firebolt, right? You just roll the dice. And D&D is built such that you can do that with these social interactions as well. Having said all of that, let me give you a couple of more, I guess, tips for the new role player. First of all, like I said, it's important to know that, generally speaking, unless you're with a group of folks that are the exception rather than the rule, other players and your DM are going to appreciate whatever effort you do put into role playing. So don't feel silly. Please don't feel silly. Second, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, if you've played with me before, you know that for dwarves, sometimes I do a stereotypical dwarven voice. But my dwarvish, honestly, the Dwarvish accent moves in between Scotch, and Irish. My dwarves can't really seem to figure out which one they might be. So if you've sat in on any of my sessions, you'll know that my dwarves are Scotch-Irish, as opposed to one or the other. And that's okay. So if I am Beard, the Tavernoni, I'll say, well, come on in, travelers. What information have you from the road? You must be weary, it's rainy out there. Why don't you come on in, have a bowl of stew, perhaps a cup or two of ale, warm your feet by the fire. So if you know anything about accents, you know that very much that was about 50-50 in terms of Scottish or Irish. So it doesn't have to be 100% consistent. It's okay if it's not. Also, it doesn't have to be particularly good, or it doesn't have to be particularly accurate in terms of a real-world representation. So if I want to do a Southern gentleman, an American gentleman from the Tidewater, particularly antebellum Tidewater South in the United States. So think Foghorn Leghorn in Looney Tunes cartoons, or think again, the antebellum Southern gentleman. So it's going to go something like this. Well, I see that we have come to the point in our relationship where weapons will be required to resolve any of our differences. It's not a great accent, and it's not, but it's not terrible. It's not full-blown Foghorn Leghorn. Well, I do declare, I say, son. But if it were, that would be fine too. And if I happen to move between them, that would be fine too. Now, here in a couple of months, I'm going to be launching a DM masterclass where aspiring dungeon masters can sign up, and we'll go through lots of different DMing techniques. Because for DMs, I know that voices are and characterization is often something that there's a lot of pressure to do, but that also they enjoy. And when we do that, I'm going to bring in an off-Broadway actor friend of mine, and we'll do an interview and learn a little bit about how to train our voices for accents. But you don't have to be, is the point. You don't have to be a professionally trained actor or voice actor in order to create a good D&D characterization. The most important rule is to have fun with it. So, okay, that's it for today. As always, please like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Come see me on social media. And I will see you out in the world.